Welcome back to another Super Bowl edition of the PFRPA Podcast. And today, a really special guest, and I'm glad he made it here to our set, Mr. Corey Jackson. Corey, how you doing, man?
Doing good, Brian, man. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about what you're doing now, your football days, but what you're doing now. And I think that's what's going to really strike a chord with the retired players that are watching this podcast. So first, tell me, I know you played for the Browns and the Broncos. So what years were you with them?
Yeah, so in 2003, I signed with the Cleveland Browns. I was a rookie free agent, which was big for me. So I signed with them because I was a basketball player initially. Was there 2.5 years, and then coaches got fired. Really interesting thing happened when your coaches get fired.
Right. It was the Browns after all. It was a tough years right there.
But I was fortunate. My D-line coach went to Denver, and so Cleveland actually retained me. So they traded away most of our defensive line, and they kept me because I was one of the younger guys. And at the time, they brought in Romeo Crennel, which changed our defense from a 4-3 to a 3-4. Yeah. But I didn't have a position. It was crazy. Like, I'm not a linebacker, and I'm definitely not a two-gap defensive tackle, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a position. And I'm going through training camp, just beating my body up. And then one day I was just like, I can't do it anymore. So I walked into the coach's office, and I was like, y'all got to let me go. And we had already had this deal structured in place. And I was like, well, $500,000, you can leave. You know, and I didn't have nowhere to go. I didn't know what team
Right.
I was going to go to. And I was like, fine. You know, I go work, you know, a regular job before I put myself through this. And fortunately, our D-line coach was at Denver at the time. He signed a deal with them that year that he got fired. Called me up and said, hey, man, we got a spot for you. And that's how it happened, yeah.
Denver's a much nicer place.
Oh, yeah, much nicer, and they were winning. I mean, it was a no-brainer.
Oh, my gosh. You know, in Cleveland, you know, it's cool they're turning it around now with their new quarterback, Baker Mayfield, of course. But, man, those were some tough years. And I remember in my career in '95, that was the Browns' last season in Cleveland before they left for Baltimore. I remember they had those dead years there. Yeah. So we won 4 games my rookie season in Jacksonville. That was our inaugural season. 2 of those games were against the Browns. Right?
Looking forward to playing the Browns.
Oh, yeah. I was like, playing them again. We'll get another win. So what interests me most as a retired player has been watching your personal transition into retirement and into work as an entrepreneur. Your change has been awesome, and that is one of the biggest struggles, as you know, for a lot of retired guys to make that transition, to find a new passion, a new purpose in life. And really develop into something that's meaningful in their lives. So tell me. I know you're the CEO of a company called Quirks. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about Quirks.
Yeah. So I started Quirks really almost by accident, right? So I was getting a lot of former teammates just reaching out, just asking questions through social media. And one day I got one of my former teammates called me. And he wasn't doing well. He was sleeping on someone's couch. He was divorced, you know, just in a bad state. And I was just saying, like, do you know what you have? Do you know what you have, right? Like
your personal brand.
Yeah, and he didn't know, right? And so from there, I just started thinking about, like, how do we help these guys understand what this is? And so usually, like, I had the idea, but I didn't really know how to execute it. And so I said, well, I'm just going to do this app, right? I'm gonna do this app, and we're going to bring all these athletes on, and we're going to all have these conversations, and it's going to be great, right?
Yeah.
And so I bring this app out, and guys came. But then it was crickets, right? Like, no one was sharing content. Nothing was happening.
Right. Like most retired guys.
So I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
You guys said you wanted this type of environment. And what I realized was just asking questions and talking to them, they really were in need of the opportunity. And they didn't really have necessarily the wherewithal or the time to really try to search and mine for it and do all of that. So I was like, well, it doesn't make sense to really have an app where everyone's just kind of collected there together and nothing's happening. Yeah. So let's access the opportunities and pair it with the athlete. And so now you tell me what you're looking for, right? What your interests are. And then we look at that and say, okay, we can accommodate that through these other companies and these brands that are looking for exactly what you are. And it makes it easier for them because now they can say, oh, well, okay, this makes sense, or no, it doesn't, but it doesn't cost them any time. And I think a lot of times guys been getting their time wasted because people are contacting them, asking them for money, right? Like invest in this and do that.
And there's no more money.
Yeah, and guys are like, man, I'm trying to get paid, right? I'm trying to figure out how to get income. And so that's where we started. What is the most important thing? Income. Okay, let's start there.
Yeah. So you're really touching in on a tough subject for a retired player, and giving them opportunity, which is incredible, which is so needed out there. Unfortunately, a lot of retired players, when we're going through the transition, especially in the early days, and I went through my own difficult time. I've talked about on the podcast before, my 4 or 5 years of just really being lost mentally. There's some inherent problems with retired guys, and that I'm sure you've seen as well. Of you lose that drive, the drive that we use to be great on the football field is not always equating to the business world. Because what do you equate that to? Like, are we expecting too much? What do you think that is?
No, I think it's just a fundamental difference between the sport and business, right? And what I mean by that is, guys are ambitious naturally. It just is a genetic thing, right? But we put it into this box, which is sport, right? And then we forget that it can't just live in that box. Like, it has to transcend that box. Right. And so once you're in that box, you're thinking like that's it, right? But in sports, if I have a bad play, like, so say me and you, I'm going against you, and you pancake me and you put me to the ground, and dirt is all in my helmet, my face is into the grass and all that, I can get up next play and get a sack.
Yeah.
Sack, fumble, and everything's all well with the world, right? Yeah. Business is not like that. You're going to suffer for a period of time with your failure.
You got to embrace the grind.
You have to embrace the grind. And a lot of times it's hard because we're used to that quick gratification. Like, I can redeem myself right now. Yeah. Well, you go out and you put a bad deal together and it falls through. It's going to take a while to get back to the next thing, right? And so your ability to be patient through that is something that you have to understand, so that it helps you make it through that tough time. Otherwise, you're going to want to give up on that.
So let's go back and let's talk about personal brand again, and what we're talking about here in our conversation, especially internally as of lately, that all guys, that if you played a down in the NFL, you carry that shield, that NFL shield, with you the rest of your life, because you've accomplished something so rare, so unbelievably awesome that a lot of guys wish they could, right, have that experience even for a moment. What is it that guys need to know about their personal brand and what that value means to them?
Yeah, I think when you look at it from just a value to value standpoint, you have this brand that still lives because it's just powerful, right? It's big, and it doesn't matter how long you played or who you played for and all that. It still exists. People want to meet you. People want to take meetings with you, right? But your ability to balance that out with what's current is really the secret to it. We can talk about what you did in the past, right? For when you played 20 years ago or 15 years ago, but it's like, it makes more sense when you did this thing that's big 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and then you have something really cool that you're passionate about at the same time. And now that makes people say, oh, wow, this is a guy that did something that no one can do, and now he's doing this other thing. And so, but a lot of times it's hard for guys to really commit to something. You may see this. The reason why it's hard for them to commit to something, like we'll commit to football because we can see where that could go. Right? Yeah. Like you can okay, I'm gonna go here, then I can get drafted, and then I can get a contract, and you can see that. Entrepreneurship and business and all of that, you can't necessarily forecast all that. You can't see it if you haven't done it before. You have no track record for that, and so the minute things get shaky, you're like, oh, this is not working. And then you abandon that, and then you go to the next thing.
So let's talk about reality. So hopefully, I know there'll be some guys that are still active or maybe just newly retired that are watching this podcast. Let's share some experience maybe with what it's like in the real world, in the real business world, right after you retire. Because we all have this thing, hey, I played, so that's going to open a ton of doors. I'm going to get business. That's going to be awesome. Everything I do is going to be great. And we know that's not the case. It's just not relevant in the real world. And I shared a story with you right before we jumped on this podcast about my first experience with raising capital for one of my earlier companies. And I was scoring meeting after meeting after meeting with these investors. We were doing a multi-million-dollar raise, and I was scoring these meetings, but nobody was cutting me a check. And I realized they all wanted to hear these really cool stories about, what's it like to play against Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green and Reggie White and all these guys. But that doesn't equate to somebody stroking you $1 million check and passing it over for business, right? I mean, that's the hard part about it. I mean, so we knew we had to kind of take ourselves back to school, so to speak, and learn what real business was all about. Because this whole era of fake it till you make it type stuff, that's done.
Oh, yeah.
That's like just far gone. It's just not going to happen.
It's too saturated anyway.
Right. And it's tough as a former player. I think they have to realize going into business, the way people look at you, it's cool that you played, but beyond that, it really doesn't matter. I mean, what's been your experience with it?
Yeah, I think the best advice I could give an athlete that's going into retirement who haven't had the experiences, haven't did the things, your network has to be impeccable. Because you look at it from a standpoint of acquisition or merger, or, if I know Brian is really good on the economic side, right? And I have some star power and I have a big idea, right? I have to recruit some people to come and actually compensate for my lack of experience and understanding in certain industries. And I think that, like, the more you can become a great recruiter, like kind of like how LeBron does, right? Like he's recruiting everybody to come and participate, the better off you're going to be. And then you learn along the way what your role is. And so you don't always have to just be the guy that is the athlete that's the draw. You're going to find a niche. You'll be like, oh, it might be operations, or it might be, on the financial side, or whatever it is. You're going to find that, but you have to use what you have, right? And what you have is the ability to draw people. And so you build around that.
And we inherently know that as players. I mean, it's building a team.
Yeah.
It's no different than, hey, if somebody asked you to go build a Super Bowl caliber team, and you're getting the best people in your network to come in and build your team. I mean, I've done it with every business venture that I've had. I've brought in the best people. And I knew early on, like, I didn't understand the economics of what it really meant and how money can be played in different areas and what it means, right? I mean, it's I knew early on that I was way behind on that side. And even when it came to, developing a product and making that product manufacturable. And then for me, it was about, oh my gosh, we need to go get patents and things like that. I mean, I knew nothing about getting patents.
And that could be overwhelming. It really can be.
It was, and it was a lot. And it was years before we started seeing success. And I just think that, that's a huge message that a lot of guys need to know of getting into business, that you have got to, it's humbling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, it was, I mean, for me, especially, not especially, we all go through this, but it was definitely humbling that you're eating that humble pie and you're going, okay, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, and I think when you fall in love with that, like, it's hard at first because it's different, it's foreign, but I started to fall in love with that, right? Like, man, okay, I just got punched in the mouth today, right? I'm like, okay. And that competitive part of me come back and say, okay, let's figure this thing out. And I wasn't crushing myself like, oh, you idiot. I was just like, oh, I've seen this before. You know, like I've been through these steps before. Yeah. And so I just keep doing the thing. And I think over time, like a lot of people that's on my team now gravitated to me because of what I was doing and what I was putting out. And I got so many calls like, hey, I want to work with you. Let's figure out a way to work together. And so you have to keep putting out what you have. And I tell people all the time, don't abandon your best ability. Right. Yeah. And so people are like, what does that mean? You know, well, I know that I can speak, right? Like I can do that. And so that's my best ability. And so some people's best ability is the fact that they're likable, right? And so you can build a team around your likability, right? Like whatever that thing is. And so you just realize what it is about yourself that draws people, and then you lean to that.
And I think that's just part of like really just getting real, you know, and understanding, look, the NFL thing is only going to get you so far. Yep. You know, let me clarify, because there's a lot of Hall of Famers around here that are watching the podcast, and let's be honest and be real with this too. There's the 1%, the top 1% of these guys that are uber famous, but the 99% guys like you and me that we played. Yeah. Right. There has to be that reality check at the door when it comes to owning and operating your own business. Yeah.
And right? I think you touched on something about being honest, right? So with me, I knew no one knew who I was. You know what I mean? Like so I didn't have this delusion of like, you know, this ideology of like I'm this big like athlete that everybody like I knew nobody knew who I was. And so for me, that was like, well, let me make a name for myself. You know, let me like create a new space.
Now you're unavoidable.
Yeah, like this guy won't go away. Right? But I think it's just being honest with yourself about who you are, and then figuring out how to fill in those gaps.
Let's talk about a couple things, because you're doing a really exceptional job at delivering a lot of content. In today's world, that's how marketing is done, right? Yep. So you're really serious about his content over here. Matter of fact, that's how I was introduced to you, was through LinkedIn, right? And then as we connected on LinkedIn, you, like I said, you were unavoidable because you had a new piece of content going up sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. I'm seeing you on my feed, which is unavoidable, right? So let's talk about the importance of building that personal brand, or building a brand period for your company. What is it? So what do you think the secret is to building the brand?
I kind of took a model, so to speak, because I've seen success happen before. And so this may be kind of odd for what I'm doing, but I remember when maybe 2003, 4, maybe 5, Lil Wayne was like blowing up. But he was doing like a mixtape every week and just giving away music.
Yep.
Just giving away music.
Content.
I mean, it was insane. And I mean, he just became one of the biggest rap artists of that time that came out, and he's still huge. Like people still love his music. And so the formula is all the same. Like you can't give out trash. It has to be like something that you really solid. And it doesn't have to be philosophical stuff. It could be funny stuff. It could be anything. Like I look at like one of the people that I think is awesome, is oh my God, his name just escaped me. Played for the Chicago Bears. Really funny guy. Oh my
God. There's a couple of them coming to mind. Probably older.
It's gonna pop back in my head. But I mean, he kills it. He's just being funny, and he makes fun of everything. And he's on all these different channels and platforms. He has tons of followers, but that's his personality. And that's one of the things when I talk about don't abandon your best ability. If when you're in an NFL locker room, you have so many awesome personalities that are so different. But a lot of times we get drawn to an ideology of like, I need to be like this, or I need to be buttoned up, or I need to be, no, you just need to be who you are. And that will allow you to be successful.
Right. Because the reality is, in today's social media driven world, there's somebody for everybody. Yeah. Right. And so people are going to congregate to your brand, your style, whatever that is, as long as you're being authentic. It's really, that's what's killing folks, is trying to be something that you're not. Yep. Right. That's
It doesn't work.
Work.
It can only go so far. It can only go so far before people realize it's not authentic, and people are drawn to realness.
And that's really, I mean, that goes along to, your business is the same thing. I mean, you can only fake the funk so long in your business before people are going to start discovering, hey, you're really not keeping up your end of the bargain.
100%.
And that's not building a brand. That's that's trying to be fly by night and all this. So I mean, that focus on maybe not being so big and explosive. A lot of players have dreams of being this big time CEO and being. Man, I tell guys all the time, just focus on what you're good at. Right. Take it one step at a time, because it's that process that will help you build, and then it's pulling great people around you on your team that are going to make you really excel and blow up into something big. Nobody does it alone.
And it's really about, like, I tell people all the time, man, go with your best move, right? And so imagine it's the last play of the game, and this is for all the marbles, and I'm pass rushing against you. I'm not going to just do some like random fly by night move. I'm going to give you my best stuff, man. Like,
it's been practiced.
Yeah. Like
and
this,
planned.
I know I can win with this move. I'm going to give you, like, I'm going to win or lose with this move. And it's the same thing about who you are and what you have. Like, win with what you have. Like, take that and give the world your best move. And like I said, a lot of times people are trying to adopt this other stuff that's not them. It's not even in their skill set. It's not even in what they do.
So I think let's take a side step here, and let's talk a little bit about the psyche of the retired athlete. What I have seen, and I want to know if you've seen the same thing too with talking to guys, oftentimes we're our own worst enemy, our own worst critic, that is, our own worst critic, and we end up poisoning ourselves because of their just a couple different things. One, it's a pride issue oftentimes, and we're unwilling to take out the trash, right? You know what I mean? Sometimes, even if you want to be the CEO of that startup, you're taking out the trash, man. You know what I mean? You're sweeping the floors,
sleeping on the floor,
right? Painting the walls. It's you doing these things, and I think some guys I've seen just kind of get delusioned with that transfer part of it. And I think part of it is a pride issue and checking that pride at the door. And the other part of this is we worry too much about what people think about us. Right? Yeah. We live in that world in sports where we're constantly being critiqued, and the coach is watching, fans are watching. But in business, it changes a little bit.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I would tell athletes to realize is that it doesn't matter. What I mean by that is you don't need a bravado, right? Because you played in the league, people just think certain things automatically. And so when they see you doing certain things that you may think you shouldn't be doing or maybe beneath you, like, they respect that. They're like, oh, wow, that's awesome that he's willing to go to that extent. And, because they have this idea about you that may not necessarily be true either. And so, I equate it to guys that I know that would wear fake jewelry, right? Because they knew no one was going to question if the jewelry was real or not, right? And so it's just like people just think that you're going to be this thing. So when they see you, doing something that you may feel like doesn't like fit into the box of being a professional athlete, they just admire that. They're like, wow, that guy is really humble and he's willing to do the thing, right? And so you're thinking in your mind, like, are they going to think that I'm struggling or I'm not doing well or, and that's probably the furthest thing away from the truth.
Yeah, in that look, and it's no secret. I every player that I've ever known, I don't care how big time they were or, just playing a few downs in the league, we all struggle with the transition. We aren't alone. Yeah. I mean, this brotherhood extends way past your playing days, but we are not alone. And I can't, tons of guys that helped me along with my transition, guys that I played with, and I really struggled. My story's been told before, but it's if it weren't for those guys, so just kind of letting that stuff go. Right? I think that is such a critical part, and truly being reborn again as this businessman. If that's truly your aspiration, I'm going, okay, I have a new passion and a new purpose. I'm going to check this pride at the door, and I'm going to go back to school, whether it's the school of life. And, look, I'll give you an example. Couple things. Early in my business ventures, before there was any investment, there was any money, it was just me. I was literally turning my backyard into a mini factory making product, like put my kids to work and my wife to work, right? And I had to learn in my late 30s, I had to learn how to operate a sewing machine.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Yeah.
I had to make this product, and here was big old offensive tackle me sitting in front of this Singer sewing machine teaching myself how to sew.
Wow.
Because I had to sew these straps together, or teaching myself how to use Adobe Illustrator, because I had to learn some basic graphic design skills to get by in the early days. Did you have any moments like that?
Yeah. I mean, I literally, it's the same thing. I had to learn everything. I think one of the things that is important, and I'm glad you're doing what you do, and I try to do it as much as possible. Guys don't know what it's supposed to look like. They don't know that, like, what you were doing that's how it's supposed to look. Yeah. Right? Like they don't know that. Because they're looking at people who may have a different network, and they may have things come together for them in a different way, and they're thinking it's supposed to look like that. But that's not how it's supposed to look. Like, the work looks like work. Right. There's no other way around it, right? Like you, it's just like coming in a training camp. You can't come in fit, trim, and ready to go if you haven't done the work. And so it's supposed to look like that, and it's supposed to feel like that. And I think one of the biggest problems is guys don't get to see you do that, or they don't get to really connect with those stories at scale. Right. And so you take a guy that's fresh out the league and they hear these stories and they're like, oh, this is an easier transition for me now, because this is what it's supposed to look like, for real. Versus me thinking in my head, like, man, it doesn't look right. No, like, it looks exactly how it's supposed to look. Yeah. It's no beautiful way to get in shape. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to do it.
Gotta lose the fat,
oh my God. Like, you have to do all of the strenuous stuff. I watched this documentary with Usain Bolt. Yeah. And he's in this field, man, with this sled and this dust everywhere. And it's like, you would think this big superstar sprinter guy would be in this world-class facility, but nah, he's out there grinding it out, man, in the hot sun. Wow. And you realize there's no other way. Like that. Like, when you see him run at this crazy, insane speed, it's because he's doing that stuff when no one's looking. And so it's really about us helping them see what's happening when no one's looking.
One of the best things I think that we can do is help them understand that. I think guys, when they see guys that have been successful on the other side, right, and they've made it in business, and we all hear about some of the big names that have done really well, and we don't necessarily see their struggle in the transition or their struggle building that company, because nobody that's worth their salt and built something successful, there's nobody that didn't embrace the grind and have their days or years where they were fighting and struggling through all of it to try to figure it out.
The funny thing is we share the good stuff. I love sharing the good stuff. I want everyone to see the good stuff. But there's some very difficult things that we have a responsibility to share with guys who have to walk that path. It's our responsibility to let them know, like, no, it's hard things that you have to go through. There's going to be times where you may not know where that next dollar is going to come from, but you have to continue to believe. And I have this thing where I say, do the thing that you can do. Like sometimes people get discouraged because they can't do the thing they want to do, but it's like, no, just do the thing that you can do. And that leads to the next thing. But it's hard for people to accept that. But I've accepted that in my life. Like, whatever I can do, and we talk about content all the time. It's like, sometimes I have people who come and they're videographers and they shoot stuff for me. Sometimes I'm just me. And I'm like, well, I got a phone. I got a tripod. I'm going to do that. Because I need to do the thing that I can do. I don't have time to wait on someone to come set up, do other stuff. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to get it out. I
tell folks all the time, don't wait.
Yeah.
Just
don't
go.
Wait. Don't
just
wait.
Start.
It don't have to be perfect, and it's not going to be perfect. And it's a great example when you look at building a company. it's never going to be perfect. And it's all, like, so my wife is an attorney. She practiced law. So she always doing continuing ed. She always learning something new, right? It's a practice. Right. It's the same thing as an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, you're learning every day something new, and it's never going to be perfect. You take like one of the biggest companies in the world, like Apple, and they have this huge bug on their phone, where like this is a big thing, so you think if that company can have these type of situations, then anybody can have these type of situations, right? And so it's just a part of the deal. It comes with it. You're going to have problems. You're going to have setbacks. All of that happens, and that's just a part of the deal. Once you accept that, then you can move on. Like I tell my team all the time, my COO, she's really dramatic. Like she's like, this has to be right and this has to be right. And she'll call me like, oh, this is wrong. And I'm like, just relax. It's okay. Like it went out. The people that have it, they saw it already. What are we going to do? Right. So let's just correct it. And the next wave won't have that experience.
I have one of those too. I don't know if Aaron's still in the room, but yeah. He's one of those two. Got every font, everything. So that's, man, this we need to have a multi-part series of talks with you. I'd love to have you back on the podcast, because what we're talking about here is so serious. This is such a big deal. And I know if I had a resource, if I could hear a couple guys that have been through the transition, that have, started their companies and how they did it, and how, that would have been just priceless information for me.
Absolutely.
And I didn't even know at the time when we first started that I could really rely on different educational outlets like YouTube, for example.
My God, yeah.
I mean, like there's so many different little tricks out there and things that you can do that will help get you going and just get started. And and I can't say this enough, and it's kind of our mantra around here is just embrace the grind, love the work, love, and I'm very fortunate. I mean, I absolutely love what I do. Like, I love it like I loved football.
Yeah.
And now I'm very blessed to be in this position, because I know a lot of guys struggle with that, of it's not that thing, and it's not. But I'm telling you, once you find that, and you will, and it takes time, and I didn't find it right away either, right? But man, it's so good to see other players doing the same thing. And obviously, you love what you do at Quirks.
Love it. And then also, Brian, one of the things that we should really be good at sharing is, like, it doesn't matter what you do. Let's start there. I know guys who are barbers, right? Yep. Well, there's another gear to being a barber. There's more levels to that. This is not just from a business perspective. It's not just cutting hair or styling hair and all that. It's so many steps to that we should really be talking about these things. Just like, oh, well, can you be teaching this? Is there something like that you can do to scale that part of the business? Like, I know guys who do that and make more money doing that than actually cutting hair, right? And so, so when we talk business, we really need to talk about these little nuances that you can do to explode your company. And it doesn't matter what you do, you can have $1 million business doing the basic thing that you do. And you can be a landscaper. You can be anything. Like, it can explode big, is what I'm saying. And it doesn't matter what it is. And I think sometimes people look like I met somebody that said, yeah, man, I'm just doing some construction stuff, right? Like, that can explode big if you have the understanding of how to do that, right? And so we have to have these conversations. Guys that are in business and have certain experiences and backgrounds, have the conversations so that they can know, like, oh, it's a bigger thing out here that I can do, and just by doing what I love to do.
And that's part of this podcast too, of like, really opening this up to the folks watching this, that we're here to serve, ask questions, get involved. I mean, we're responding to everything that we see, right? And across all of our social channels. But, this is, this is just such an integral subject, and it's such an important, everything that you've said across the board about just every step, every small, minute step, and then every corner that you turn in expanding your business, it's a process, like you were saying, right? It's a process. I think guys need to realize that. They need to embrace that part of it too. Like just like anything else, you weren't a star football player overnight. Didn't just happen.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It took a long time and a lot of training in the weight room, on the track, whatever that was. Embracing that part of it is going to be a key factor to their success. There's no doubt.
And I think also, really quick, I know you're probably trying to wrap it up. Our ability to get guys to not break away, right? So what typically happens for a lot of especially NFL athletes, we just go on the ground. We just solo dolo, man. I'm out of here, and I think part of the reason why that happens is I want you to know me how I was.
That's
right?
a pride issue I was talking about.
Yeah,
right?
and it's like, no, man, like you should we and not even that it should happen. The environment should be created so it can happen. And so the reason why it doesn't happen, like for instance, you have these chapters, right, in these different cities where retired players have
right,
and it's not successful, right?
Yep.
And the reason why it's not successful is it doesn't, the organization of it doesn't invite me. It doesn't make me feel compelled to be a part of it.
Right.
It doesn't answer it doesn't solve the problem that I have. Right. And it doesn't invite me into that space to do that. And so therefore I'm like, well, that's not for me.
And that's really why the two core purposes of the PFRPA, which is your health and your money.
Oh, yeah.
And bringing guys together in a real network so that we can start doing something more meaningful around this, because it's not. Guys have families. They have responsibilities, right? They need to take care of these things. So when I go and I spend my time to go to a meeting, I want to be networking. I want to know, hey, how am I bettering myself from going to this meeting?
Right.
I'm going to waste my time.
You want to see the value in it. Absolutely.
I'm not going there to just reminisce about the old days. I mean, there's a time and a place for all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, as we get older, we got to take care of our business.
Absolutely.
So that is, one of the things that excites me most about the PFRPA, that we're digging right into this. We're going to start addressing these issues. We're going to start connecting people, connecting companies, so that guys have these direct resources instead of just kind of, we've seen a lot of this, and we'll keep names out of this, but we've seen a lot of, hey, we got this program and this program, and this program. But the follow through with all of it is daunting, right? Of making that path easier. That's a lot what we're working on here, and especially when it comes to business, and especially with businesses like yours with Quirks, where you are intentionally working with athletes and trying to find a place for them.
Yeah. And what the funny thing about that, Brian, is too, so people have been trying to do this for a very long time. This independent entities, and I know people personally that just give up on it because they don't think you can make money doing it, right? Yeah. And so think about just from the recruiting side, that when we partner with companies from a recruiting side, we've created a revenue model that allow them to have access to, like we were talking about, a certain type of individual. And so we handpick all of our athletes. We talk to them, we vet them. You have to have this type of mindset. You have to have this type of, and these are the things that we are selling back to these companies, right? And they're like, they'll pay for that because there is no way they can find that. It's not a place for them to find that. Right. But if you don't create that urgency and you don't have the right message around it, you think that it doesn't work. You're like, nobody wants to pay for that.
If players only knew of how many, because we talked about having brand equity. Some guys have brand equity in their community. Some it's more regional or statewide or nationwide. If guys really understood how many even smaller places, car dealerships, right? Health centers and things like that want to engage with these guys that have equity in their community. Oh, yeah. It's massive. And I've learned that from experience, of, a lot of the companies that we've worked with, and wanting to engage with other retired players. So it's there.
Yeah, it's definitely
there.
Yeah.
It's definitely there. Yeah. And so just absolutely love what you're doing at Quirks. So, first of all, if somebody wants to learn more about Quirks, where do they go?
Yeah, so what happens is if you're an athlete or a company or brand, you just go to quirks.com. It's a short form there. You fill out that form, and then what happens after that, we contact you. We're going to ask you for more information. It's a little more extensive, and you get that information to us, and then it's kind of like an application process. We process all of that, we figure it out, and then if you're a good fit, then we move on to the next step, and that's trying to get you onto our platform and then move forward from there.
So for the folks that are listening, we'll put a link in the body of the post that this goes with, but it's Querks, QWERKZ.
KZ, yep.
Right,
An interesting thing behind the name, it is just exactly what it says. It's quirks, right? It's different. It's a athletes have all of these different personalities and these
we have some quirks.
and so it just really aligned to what we see every day. Like when we walk into the locker room, we see like guys doing weird stuff, or we see a guy over there, reading the Forbes, or we see a guy with a Playboy, or we see, you see all of these different personalities, and so that's where the name came from.
That's awesome. What's great insight on that too. But anyways, Corey, this was awesome having you out here. This can't be the last show we do.
I'm
we
excited.
We have
to
do a series of these. Well, I want to break down these topics. I'm gonna put some questions out to the audience too about like what do the guys want to hear about? Like where do we start with this? But man, we need to do a whole series on business, man, for sure.
And I'm locked and loaded, so I'm ready.
I know. You're never worried about too much content.
Right?
All right. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.